What is going on, guys? Chip here. Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG video, and today I have a very special guest coming off his second place finish at the largest Pokemon tournament of all time, North American International Championship runner-up, John Kettler. How's it going? How you doing, man?
It is going pretty good. I'm still not 100% recovered from the weekend, but I'm doing great.
Great, man. Yeah, huge congratulations to you. Coming in second place at a 1,300 person tournament is pretty crazy. It'd be pretty hard for me to fathom. But yeah, great accomplishment. Congratulations to you. And yeah, John recently, if you guys don't know, has his own website / blog. Hey Trainer is it .net or .org?
.org.
It's .org. So heytrainer.org. There will be a link to that in the description. John did do a tournament report over there, so you can definitely read about that if you want to hear about his rounds, his matchups, stuff like that. Today we're going to be doing something similar to what I've done in my previous videos with Ryan and Sam, who both also top 8 at the tournament. We're just going to talk about the testing process leading up to the tournament, what led John to play this Decidueye Vileplume deck, and then we'll talk about some World stuff looking forward to the future of Primal Clash through Burning Shadows. So, you ready to do this? Let's hop right into it. Sweet. So, Decidueye Vileplume, you're the father of the deck. You created it. You brought this to the forefront of the format back in, was it Anaheim, correct? Anaheim Regionals, top 16. And then we saw it, you take over St. Louis Regionals with a second place finish there, losing to Mega Rayquaza, Alex Wilson, good friend of both of ours in the finals. And then we saw everyone just kind of be like, okay, John must know what he's doing, and then everyone played it in Australia. How's that felt like throughout this time, being like kind of the father of this deck that has been brought in as kind of, you know, for a few months considered the best deck in the format?
Honestly, it's kind of cool. I mean, I think the one thing that really surprised me was how few people really wanted to get on the Decidueye bandwagon early. Because, I mean, you go back and you take a look at some of the cards that have been released beforehand, and people went nuts about Golbat and Crobat because they did the same thing once. And then I'm seeing this card and I'm like, oh shoot, this thing's going to be dealing 2 damage counters every single turn. That's literally put this card into play and you get some sort of free knockout again.
Right.
And so that accentuates every other thing. I mean, it makes every other attack in the game that it can be paired with all that better. I mean, it's a pretty well-built concept just by itself, where, I mean, it, like, Force to Giant plans makes it faster. Being able to get back cards with Hollow Hunt GX is a built-in design factor where you're able to reuse all these broken effects. Like, it seems like it wanted to... It seems like it was just set to be good, like, but for whatever reason, once Sun and Moon came out, people really didn't want to talk that much about Decidueye. I mean, I think the hype in Standard was, oh, everybody needs to use like Garbodor Mewtwo, everybody needs to use Darkrai, Eviltal, which are all great decks, but there was just, I think the deck, like the whole idea of Decidueye just really got discredited at the beginning and when the set actually came out. And same thing goes for Expanded. I remember there was a big debate between, like, whether or not Decidueye Seismitoad or Crobat Seismitoad were better, and you had a lot of the fans of Crobat Seismitoad saying, oh, this deck's so good, I mean, nothing can really put it over the top. But then me and Alex Shemansky ended up top 8ing that tournament, doing really well with it. And since then, it's just been kind of neat to see it take off, where I think it's the only deck that has made the final table of the Intercontinental Championships 3 times. So
yeah,
it got second in Melbourne, it got first and second, and I think third and fourth in Brazil, and then it got
right, yeah,
and then it got second in NA. I wonder who did that.
Maybe we'll get to talk to that guy, but
probably,
but yeah,
he's gonna be some scrub.
But yeah, that definitely should feel pretty cool. But then I think once Guardians Rising came out, a lot of people kind of wrote off Decidueye Vileplume. I know my first weekend of League Cups, there was a lot of players still playing it, and I played Drampagarb at that first weekend, and it just seems like the deck just has an inherently bad matchup. You have to play so many items to get set up most of the time. Like, sure, sometimes you have really, strong opening hands where you just draw Forest, double Decidueye, and only have to play like 3 items. But that's not going to be the case most of the time. So starting out in the Guardians Rising format, was Decidueye something you were still playing? I think I remember seeing you post on Twitter that you won a League Cup with Sylveon, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's not true. I only top 8'd that League Cup with Sylveon.
Sorry, yes.
But no, it's okay. But yeah, I'm thinking about just some of the things involving the deck. I generally, you don't have to play you do have to play items to get set up, but I think the range of how many you do have to play is never anything too prohibiting. Like, it's about anywhere from 2 on a good day to 5 on a bad day.
Okay.
So you don't have to bleed through your entire deck and all your items to do it, but sometimes you have to play a lot in order to get somewhere. So Garbodor is going to be dealing damage.
Sure, and it seems like Drampa GX is something that can potentially be an issue as well, just having the ability to manage your energy and just discarding double colorless, which is such a precious resource in this deck. Yeah. So, leading up to internationals, were you pretty set on this deck from the start, or did you do any other testing? Well, what was your thought process going into the tournament?
Yeah, I was testing this, and I was also testing a little bit of Zoroark Umbreon. I really liked a lot of the matchups that Zoroark Umbreon had, but there were some things that I didn't quite feel as comfortable with. And in addition to that, is easier to pick up a deck as Zoroark would be at first blush on something like Decidueye. I knew Decidueye a lot better. Sure. And in terms of what I actually trusted to help me get through a 1,400-person field, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe I can go with this deck I've been using half the season, or I can use with this deck that I have never played in any tournament, and I can probably play just fine, but it's not something that I'd be really comfortable with. And so I went with what, for me at least, was a pretty reliable thing. But I think that a lot of the people who had been playing Decidueye at least a little bit never really wanted to play the deck. I think they just felt forced to play it because, at least up until Sun and Moon, it was the best deck. Like, there was no question about it. It was always a question of what cards you wanted to play in it, whether you wanted to run a normal Lugia attacker version or if you wanted to run tech basics like Jolteon. But all in all, it was the best deck, and a ton of people who normally would not like that deck at all went ahead and played it anyways, because this was a situation where you really had to test, okay, well, do I have a play style, or am I just going to use whatever I think is the best deck? And I mean, I'm comfortable saying I have a play style. I bet other people do, but I think a lot of people fought their play style in order to use Decidueye Vileplume for then. And then when Guardians Rising came out, people were like, oh, there are all sorts of other different things I can use. So it opened up the field, and I think it balanced things a lot.
Sure. Okay, yeah, definitely makes sense. So I want to ask you a little bit about your list specifically and how you landed on the specific options that you chose to play. I know you talked about this a little bit in your article, but you can just touch on it briefly here as well. So you decided, a lot of the lists I had seen post Guardians Rising had cut the Lugia EX from their list, and they just relied on Tapu Lele as kind of their main, slap a DCE on attacker to just like one attachment and go. But you decided to keep Lugia around. I think Deep Hurricane is definitely a very good attack, but do you want to just talk about Lugia EX and how good that was for you at the tournament and what made you decide to put it in?
Yeah, actually, Lugia EX was the 60th card in the whole deck. Okay. I was a little split between... and actually, I think one thing I can do that I haven't really done too much in either my article or in one of the previous interviews that I did is go through kind of the process that I had the night before, where I got to a point where I came pretty close to using my friend Matt Shepard's exact list that he used at a League Cup a while back.
Okay.
But I had already tried Alolan Ninetales in a tournament before, didn't really like it too much. I thought that in order to play an effective line with Vileplume, you had to dedicate 2-1 or 2-2 spaces, which is just way too much considering how many things I wanted to play. So I dialed back from that, and instead of running the Alolan Ninetales, I just basically ran virtually, it's 5 cards off of the exact list that I used all the way back in February.
Right.
It's that unchanged, where the only changes I can think of, the 5 cards are it's actually the same count on spaces, but instead of running 3 Shaman and 2 Lugia, I run 2 Shaman, 2 Tapu Lele, and 1 Lugia, which is effectively the same distribution, only with a little more consistency.
Mm-hmm.
So those are I want to say 2 or 3 spaces right there. And then I switched from 4 Trainer's Mail and 3 N to 3 Trainer's Mail and 4 Ns. I mean, it's kind of a weird count, but essentially I'm taking away a little bit of speed for a lot more reliability throughout the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
I just cut a level ball for space, and I ran an Olympia, which is really good to get out of tight spots where a Vileplume without a Float Stone might be active, or if you want to switch out of Espeon's Confusion, like that. And there are all sorts of different applications you can use Olympia for in basically every matchup. Like, I think between Olympia and Lugia, both of them put in a lot of work.
Sure. Yeah, I had actually considered, I went to the Origins special event and was talking to my friend Brad Curcio, who had played it recently at Mexico City Regionals. He and Azul both played it there, and was asking him about the deck and about playing it. And I know their list was a lot different. They played things like Drampa GX, and they played the Tapu Koko promo. Were those ever cards that you had considered putting in the list?
Yeah, actually, they were cards I considered at one point or another, and in fact, I had a very weird rainbow list of the deck that featured all sorts of bizarre things like Magearna, and yeah, I had Drampa too, and I think I had 2 or 3 other cards. They ranged from being really good to being really awful. I mean, just whatever I had in there. I basically had a smorgasbord of things that I put in the deck at one point or another.
Sure.
But Drampa didn't really make the cut because, at least here, it's not as aggressive as I'd like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And Tapu Koko didn't make the cut either because it doesn't let me be as aggressive as I'd like to. And while it's a pretty good starter in the deck, I took a long, hard time to think about exactly what matchups does Tapu Koko improve for the deck. And maybe if you ran Espeon EX2, you probably tilt some matchups in your favor, but there really wasn't that much to justify playing in the deck, so.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely makes sense, and, the list you decided to play obviously worked out pretty well for you. So yeah, and another card, I mean, you kind of touched on the Olympia a little bit, but that was a card that I don't think we've seen much in Decidueye lists up to this point, but it does make a lot of sense with having access to it in the deck through Tapu Lele under item lock. So yeah, Olympia ended up being a pretty good inclusion for you throughout the weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remembered a couple people during the Sun and Moon era, like Ross, thinking about running an Olympia, but I never really felt justified in running it in the deck up until Guardians Rising because of how hard it is to draw.
Mm-hmm.
But once Guardians Rising did hit, in some of my really early testing for the deck, I found that Olympia was actually pretty easy to find and fetch out. And I also found that healing helped out a lot too, to make the deck a little bit better to counteract how good Garbodor is. And so me running Olympia, while that was a last-second inclusion, it really wasn't that far-fetched for me to put it in because I had already tested it a little bit and I found that it was good.
Sure. So heading into the tournament, also, what were some of the matchups that you were expecting to play against, and how did you go about testing specific matchups? What were some of the decks you tested against the most, I guess I should ask?
Well, I mean, I guess it's tough to say because really you can't really categorize all the testing just pre-nationals because I considering how blocked off everything is and how constant the season is now, it basically just feels like there's some sort of flux of testing the moment a set comes out, where Guardians Rising comes out, you may be testing a lot, you may be testing some, you may be testing not at all, and So basically, what I had to work off of was whatever I've learned from following the metagame and then the one regional that I played in Mexico City. And then from there, I mean, there really wasn't that much. I knew that Espeon Garb would be a lot more popular. I knew that Drampa Garb would fall off on a little bit of popularity, but that both would be really popular. Zoroark would be popular. So of course I thought about all those decks. I didn't actually do a great deal of testing against Zoroark, but I did test a decent amount against Espeon and decent amount against Drampa Garb too. And so what I was trying to figure out in my testing process was, okay, let's put myself into a bunch of really unfavorable situations and see if I can come close or if I actually can dig out of them. And I think that helped prepare me so that when I was actually playing the matchup a million times like I did at Nationals, then navigating weird spots was easier and capitalizing on good spots was even easier too.
Sure. And through talking, like I mentioned earlier when I was talking to Brad pre-Origins about the deck, he had labeled Espeon Garbodor as being just a really bad matchup for the deck. Is that something that you've found as well, that just Espeon Garb is pretty hard for the deck to deal with?
Yeah, I definitely think Espeon Garb is a hard matchup for the deck. And to be perfectly honest, I think I overperformed against it at Nationals.
Okay.
Like, I didn't play against it at all day 2, because at that point Drampa Garb had been dominating, but I played against it 4 times day 1, and I went 3-0-1 against it. But I think that, I mean, and I did a little bit of a mini tournament report when I was talking earlier today, but I definitely think that under normal circumstances, I probably should have gone 2-2 against the deck.
Okay.
But I think that I think I got a little lucky against it. I definitely earned a lot of the match points that I got from it, but I probably got a little lucky against that matchup. I think it's negative for you. I think it's probably like 40-60. I think like 40% Decidueye, 60% SB Garb, and so like 3-0-1. I mean, like I'll take that. It's about the best I could have hoped for.
And I think to have a deep run at any major tournament, you're going to have some plays go your way. You're going to have to get a little lucky somewhere along the line. So, I mean, that could be an example of where that ended up happening for you. So, so just looking at, I know you've done tournament report on Hey Trainer, as well as with our friends Kirk and Jeff and them over at the Super Rodcast, which I'll leave a link to that as well in the description for you guys. But do you want to talk about, just real briefly, you want to talk about kind of top 8, heading into top 8, you were paired up against, was it Gustavo you played in top 8?
Yeah, I played against Alex Square.
Okay, excuse me, yes. So Greninja in top 8 definitely seems like a deck that you have a pretty favorable matchup against, but he did play the Talonflame Break. Was that ever something that was a factor in your games?
Actually, yeah. I mean, he flat out destroyed me the first game because I had a slow setup. But whenever it looked like I was actually poised to make a pretty decent comeback, his Talonflame Break just blew me up for 140 damage. So, like, I think it makes a big difference in getting up to damage ceilings that the deck otherwise wouldn't against Decidueye. So I think that makes a pretty big difference there. I mean, honestly, I think it's still totally a losing matchup for Greninja, but if he had a chance, and I think the chance, like, I think that definitely gave him the out that he needed in the matchup. And I ended up winning the next 2 pretty handily, but I think that if he was going to have a win condition against Decidueye, it was probably going to involve some sort of neat play with Talonflame Break.
Okay, and then in top 4, you played against a pseudo mirror match against Igor. And Igor, you know, obviously one of the best players in the game, probably of all time, you know, some of the highest ranking accomplishments. How do you feel that matchup goes with the, you know, you had the Vileplume, he has the Ninetales. How do things like that kind of work out?
I mean, basically what it comes down to is it's his sort of techiness versus my aggressiveness, because despite all these different options that he had in his list, he didn't really actually have a whole lot of really beefy, hard attackers other than the one Tapu Lele and, of course, the Decidueyes. But I had 2 Tapu Lele and I had one Lugia, so that let me I think, go a little bit more on the aggressive and capitalize on stuff more. Because if you look back and watch our games, I think we definitely. It's weird because I can definitely, like, I've probably, out of all the series, because I've watched at least a little bit of all my stream matches, but that one I've probably seen the most, and I think it's the most interesting to pick up on from both of us, because in some way, like, we're both trying to play it as carefully as we can, but in other ways I think that in the matchups that we lost, we kind of overthought it in different ways, you know? I mean, to give you an example, I think that maybe the double colorless miraculous shine play that Igor makes near the end of the first game is a little bit of overthinking just to get my Decidueye off the board, when maybe a simpler approach might have helped out a bit more. And then me in the second game, I might have psyched myself out a little bit by wanting to keep Vileplume off the board for a little while so that A, he can Lysander stall my Vileplume because I didn't have a Floatstone, and B, so that I could have access to my items so that I could keep up momentum with him. But actually having that Vileplume, that game would have made a difference, whereas the first game, my 2 Oddish were prized, so it didn't even matter.
Sure, yeah. You love prizing pretty important pieces on stream.
Yeah, okay, I'm thinking back to it, and I've, let's see, out of all the times I've been streamed, I've prized 3 Grass Energy 2 separate times. I've prized 2 out of 2 Oddish once, and that was against Igor. I prized 3 Rowlet against Alex Wilson, and then the second game I was streamed against Xander Pero, I prized 2 Vileplume.
Man, gotta love it. Gotta love it. So, yeah, and I loved seeing your picture as well that you shared on Facebook of adding the 3 Rowlets at the top of the trophy and the 2 Oddishes at the bottom. Just really, really well thought out. A+ for me. But, so yeah, looking back at the tournament, obviously you can't complain about a second place finish, but is there anything you think you would go back and change about your list or anything like that? Or do you think this is the ideal 60 for a Decidueye list post Guardians Rising?
I mean, that's a pretty big question, but honestly, I really like the list. It would have been nice, maybe, and this is only something that I just began to reflect on a little bit earlier today. It might have been a neat idea to cut a trainer's mail for a Skyla.
Okay.
Because I remembered I was floating around the idea of running a Skyla in my list the night before, and in fact, I remember Mallow being kind of a cute inclusion I threw into the deck when I played it in Mexico City. And in that list, I only ran 2 Trainer's Mail. But on the other hand, I mean, you got to go fast, you got to set up. And so having, I think, 3 Trainer's Mail was probably the best choice. It would have been nice to draw into that Field Blower in the final game of the match. But on the other hand, I think having 3 Trainer's Mail is probably the reason why I ended up where I did. I mean, because I know that maybe one turn or one game where I really needed to not play a supporter but just keep on bleeding through my deck until I got a Sycamore, having the Trainer's Mail over the Skyla probably made a big difference. But that, or like finding some way to fit a second Field Blower, it's tough to say, but
sure.
I mean, for the most part, I'm happy with the list. I can't really think of anything that I make a big change to.
Of course, sure. So heading into the World Championships, just over a month, just under 2 months, however you want to put it. Is this definitely a high up contender for you for the play for Worlds?
It's tough to say because on one hand, I think a lot of cards add to the deck. I think the Guzma really helps with it. I think that the Safeguard Alolan Ninetales adds some options, but on the other hand, what some of the cards are giving, they take away too. Like, more people are going to run Guzma in lists as opposed to Lysander, and so essentially what that means is it's going to be a lot harder to Lysander block something.
Sure.
Because your opponent might be running anywhere from 1 to 3 Guzma in their list. And also I think that fire matchups are probably going to get a lot harder now because of the Kiawe supporter. I mean, I haven't really had a chance to test the new set at all. Only kind of theory-mon a little bit about cards that are probably going to be in it.
Right.
But Ideally, I'd like to switch. I'd like to switch away from the Decidueye Vileplume. I mean, that's honestly how I felt when Guardians Rising came out, but look what happened.
Right. I mean, that's kind of...
Yeah, I played the deck for 5 months.
Yeah, I mean, once you like find a rhythm with something, I mean, you obviously had great success with the deck before this tournament, so like, it makes sense that you would come back to it. I mean, I was in a similar situation where, you know, leading up to this tournament, I was testing all sorts of different decks. I was testing Garbodor variants, Drampa Garbodor, Espeon Garbodor, as well as Zoroark pretty heavily. And, you know, 30 minutes before the tournament started, just said, you know what, I'm going to play what I have played most of this season that I'm comfortable with, and I ended up playing Rayquaza. I think that's just, you know, for a tournament as large as the North American Internationals was, I think you just have to play what you know, and you kind of alluded to that earlier. Just like comfort plays such a big factor in, you know, making a good deck choice for a large tournament like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you may play something you may not be entirely happy with it in some way, shape, or form, but I think that's definitely better than the alternate situation, which is something I've experienced quite a few times, which is going with something that's just untested, maybe overthought, not your comfort zone at all, and probably just overall a bad idea. Because I remembered in the very first Nationals when SP was legal, I had been testing really hard, like this really consistent but really straightforward Luxray list. And then when I get to Nationals that year, I see all these people testing Luxape out in the open gaming area. And at that point, I'm like, man, I think I want to switch to Luxape. And then I overthought it, and then I played a really bad Luxape list. And then, I mean, like, surprise, I did really bad. And it was it was a good learning experience, because in that tournament, the top 2 decks were Kyle Stukovich with Luxape, with a list that was completely different than mine. But then second place was this streamlined, really normal Luxray list that was almost card for card the exact same one that I had been testing. So I thought about that, and I think that was a good moment for me to appreciate that, hey, I mean, your situation may be different. I mean, people may be testing all sorts of things. Matchups can go all sorts of ways, but playing something that you know definitely gives you a much higher ceiling for how you can do, and probably a much higher floor too. Because, I mean, worst case scenario, maybe you play something you know, and you might not make day 2, but you might at least get some of the championship points you need if you need to get 500 for Worlds. Like, I mean, there's
that's exactly what ended up happening to me. So it works out. You know, I of course wanted to go deeper in the tournament, but I only needed points for. Job, what's up? Sorry, you cut out there for a second.
I just said good job because.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, so you know, I just needed to get top 256, and so I ended up playing the deck I was comfortable with, that had earned me most of my championship points throughout the season, and you know, it ended up getting me there. So, but yeah, anyway, continuing on in our discussion, talking about the World Championships. What are some other, you know, you mentioned Guzma as being kind of a big impact card from Burning Shadows, and I know you may not have had a huge opportunity to really delve super deep into the set. I know you just got back a few days ago from International, still recovering, like you said at the beginning. But from your brief overlook of Burning Shadows, what are some of the other, or just from what you've heard, what are some other cards you expect to be heavy impactors from Burning Shadows at Worlds?
I think just by virtue of it winning Japanese Nationals, I mean, Gardevoir GX is probably going to be a really big deal.
For sure.
The Diancie that was playing that list, actually, I have been waiting for a card like that to come out for forever.
For Decidueye?
Yeah, you got it, man. Like, actually, there's a promo Celebi that came out last year in the Generations boxes, and that thing, like, it's just so frustrating because it's like, I don't remember if it runs a colorless, if it runs a grass or what, but I'm thinking, man, that would have been perfect in Decidueye Vileplume if it wasn't a coin flip. And now, there's this Diancie that does it without a coin flip, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, honestly, like, that Diancie would be good in Decidueye Vileplume.
For sure.
I mean, if you have the space for it, it would be great. And, I mean, I would hope you have space for it in a stage 2 deck like Gardevoir GX. I mean, like the Japanese Nats champion did. I think that, like, that card is just good.
Yeah.
Any card that lets you get your stage 2 out by turn 2 without Rare Candy, especially with... I'm assuming that Gardevoir, or not Gardevoir, Garbodor is going to be pretty popular even headed into Worlds. Like, that isn't going to change a bit. Yeah, it's clearly the front runner. I wouldn't even be surprised if a lot of people flat out in that deck towards list and just maybe change a card or two for the new set, because from what I remember from Worlds last year, I mean, you basically had people playing exactly what they knew, or you had people playing some sort of brand new deck. I mean, with the sole, like, the major exception was, of course, Shintaro, who won with the Mega Audino deck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was just completely out of left field for most people.
Right.
But, and that's going to be the cool thing, too, about not having that much time to work with the new cards, because that's the perfect opportunity to find something and then just shock a lot of people. And that's kind of what I did with the Decidueye a little bit. I mean, I think if I ran a card or two different in my original list, I might have done better at Anaheim.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the whole idea behind wanting to run Decidueye from the very first tournament that I used it in, was I wanted something that had that perfect balance between play options, between surprise factor, between just really intimidating, rough lock and control. I think, I don't know what the right card combination is, but I think there has to be something there in the new set. You're asking me about other cards that are probably going to make a difference. I want to see Marshadow do something. I mean, Marshadow, I think, has, just by the nature of its ability, probably has applications for every imaginable deck you could play. One thing I got to watch out for is, because, I mean, like, I was joking a little bit at the beginning, saying, like, half joking when I said I'm a scrub, but actually I have kind of a, like, ever since I was a little kid, I had a real, like, scrub mentality when it comes to building decks, where I like to build decks that are fun in some way. I mean, they may not be fun for my opponents, but they're at least amusing to me. And so, I mean, that goes all the way back to when I was playing weird, awful, like, Alakazam decks and things like that. And the same thing goes here, where, like, there are some cards like Ho-Oh GX I see that really interest me. I think that the right card combination with that GX attack could be something. And that's not even to say anything about the fact that it is 180 for 4.
Right. And it's not weak to water, GX, which is a great thing for Volcano decks. Yeah, that definitely adds a little bit to it. Maybe, I mean, like, I'd like to say, like, maybe something with Charizard GX, but then I have to remember that Charizard is awful. They've never printed a good Charizard, have they? Like, they just don't. It's the fan favorite. They just don't want to give him a good card.
The closest I came to ever making it work in anything was actually like a month ago when I ran a 101 line in Metagross. Like a 101 line of the
Evolutions one?
Yeah, the Evolutions.
Oh my gosh. That, like, every energy attached to it's a fire energy, and it does like 200 for 4? Is that right?
Yep.
Oh man, that's actually kind of spicy. I don't hate it.
It's still pretty bad. but one game on PGCGO, I algorithm GX for the pieces I needed, and I had a Charmander in play. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful. I love it, man. I love it.
But then I lost, so it wasn't.
Man.
But
it was worth it for the meme.
Always for the memes. That's why we dream.
Dreams for the memes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know that actually I was talking about this earlier when I did my video with Ryan, but or maybe it was with Sam when I was talking about this, but our defending world champion Shintaro Ito just top 4'd the Japan tournament with Decidueye Glossopod GX. Yep. Is that something you have kind of been theory mining through your head? Do you think Glossopod is something that has potential?
Well, I haven't theory modded that much, but I mean, I might net deck it from him. It looks pretty decent.
Well, unfortunately, I wish it seems really good for their format because they still have Battle Compressor, so they just do the 4 battle compressor, 4 revitalizer, and get their Pokemon set up instantly. But unfortunately, no battle compressor. Can't make that happen.
Like, you'd be surprised. Honestly, I think that engine is a little overrated because when I got second in Collinsville with the deck, I remembered quite a few people asking me, "Well, why didn't you play battle compressor? Why didn't you play battle compressor?" And like it's not like Loranz's Plume. It just doesn't flow as nicely. But on the other hand, I mean, like maybe Shintaro was onto something, at least for the XY on format, because that kind of has the same general flow, like the same deck list composition that a Lorantis Plume would, because you have the one stage 1 and the stage 2, and that probably makes all the difference versus running 2 stage 2s, at which point it becomes really clunky.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that deck idea could probably be okay, like maybe even pretty good in the current format, the current international format, which doesn't have battle compressor legal.
Sure.
But Galistopod in generals look pretty interesting. I mean, 120 for 1 is not bad.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, like I might be understating it a little bit there, but it's not bad. And then on top of that, you've got a free retreat basic, and you've got just a ton of support. You've got Lorantis promo, or if you want to run it, you got the Decidueye. So I don't know, maybe
there's potential there.
Yeah, maybe there is.
For sure. So, any other things you want to add when talking about the... Oh, yeah, one other question I just remembered I wanted to ask you. I think last year at Worlds, you know, we had sort of the same format where we had a set become legal, where it was the Worlds tournament was the first major tournament with the new set legal. And we'll have the same thing here with Burning Shadows this season. But we didn't really see many new archetypes last year at the World Championships. We saw a couple of Japanese players bring Volcanion decks to top 16 finishes, I believe. But other than that, it seems like most people just used tools like Pokemon Ranger and Special Charge and Talonflame and put those into already existing decks like Night March and Greninja. Do you think we'll see sort of the same mindset going into the World Championships this year? Are we just using some new tools like Guzma and Acerola, some good supporters, Plumeria maybe in decks, and or do you think we'll see some new archetypes come out this year at the World Championships?
Well, actually, you know what? I think you're probably on the mark with that, because Garbodor's positioned pretty well relative to the international meta and relative to a lot of the new cards that are coming out. I'm not sure if the partner for the deck will change, but we're in a spot where there isn't that much that shakes up Garbodor in the new set. There isn't anything that really makes it bad. So I think in absolute worst case scenario, Garbodor would probably be played about as much as Decidueye is now, which is not an insane amount, but definitely on the uptick. I think the mentality of most people going in is that they will probably think of Garbodor as the best deck, like without a doubt. And so they might not question that a whole lot, and so they might just go ahead and use a pretty streamlined, normal version of the deck. But that probably opens up some pretty nice opportunities for weirder cards like Acerola to make a big difference. And yeah, like just to be clear, I think that Acerola is also a really good card. I should have mentioned that earlier. I mean, like, actually Acerola might help make Decidueye Vileplume busted in a way that hasn't been before.
It definitely seems like it could be good, especially if you have a damaged Decidueye active. You get to use your Feather Arrow, pick it up, and then put it back down and use it once again and keep your energies. So definitely seems like it could be very good. So any last words you want to add, John? Anything adding to your comments about the NAIC or about the upcoming World Championships?
No, that's all I got. All I know is that I have a lot of thinking to do. I mean,
same, absolutely.
Like there's a lot to do, and I'm not really sure. All I'm hoping for is I'm hoping that PTCGO doesn't have some devastating bug on a really important card.
Oh no, yeah, that would be terrible.
Yeah, do you remember Ninja Boy being busted last?
Yeah, I do remember that. I wasn't testing for Worlds then because I didn't have my invite that year, but I can't imagine that's a pretty important card, and weren't able to really test with it leading up to Worlds. So
yeah, I hope the QA team's on the dot this year, because I mean, I like random matches on PTCGO are a really underrated testing method.
Yeah, I test a lot on PTCGO as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that is going to do it for us. So I'll give John a second here if he wants to do any shout-outs, leave any plugs. I did mention earlier he has his own website, so I'll give him a second to talk about that. And any other plugs you want to do, man, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the first thing is, I mean, like Chip was saying, I have my own website that I've been running for quite a while called HeyTrainer.org. It's partially a message board for people to just goof off and say whatever they want. And then there's a blog that I've been running and I recently revived that deals a lot with free strategy content. So go ahead and check it out. And then I've also got a Twitter handle in case you want to follow me. It's called @Calchexas, spelled CALCHEXAS, Calchexas. And that's all I got for now. Also, oh yeah, I got a Poke Beach article coming out next week. I do the occasional premium article for Poke Beach, like about once a month or so.
Sweet, absolutely. So I'll leave links to all those things. Definitely make sure you check out HeyTrainer.org. I know I personally enjoy reading John's articles a lot, so I would encourage you to check that out. Also, if you are a Poke Beach Premium member, you can check out his article once that goes up. I will also leave that down below, and follow him on Twitter for some bomb tweets about Pokemon. And see you tweet about Pokemon Go and stuff all the time, so you can check him out over there.
Maybe about other stuff too.
Yeah, other stuff as well. So, yeah, that is going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, John, for taking some time out of your evening to sit down with me. And just huge congratulations once again. Second place at this huge tournament. Just insane accomplishment. Huge congrats to you.
Thanks a lot, man. It's been fun.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for watching. We're going to get out of here. Make sure you leave a like on this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't. All that good stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, take care.